All right, folks, it is Tuesday, February 27th of 2024. And of course, a lot of things are going on in the world. Yours truly had the privilege of going to Duke University and talking about the Hayti Heritage Center and the Black Wall Street in front of folks that are celebrating Service Week on yesterday. So I did that yesterday evening on a pleasant day. So it was absolutely good going on a walk down to the campus, not that far from where I currently reside, and actually talking to some students about that particular part of history, as that was part of their service week that was going on. So definitely it was good to meet the students, and some of them are actively involved. As a matter of fact, one the young lady told me that she will be graduating this year and then taking a couple of years off, a gap year, in order to study the MCAT and then go off to medical school in someplace. She said she might be coming back to North Carolina, or she might be going to New York, or a number of other places that she is exploring. And I got a chance to talk to some of the others and see that they were about ready to graduate as well, and were involved in different organizations. And some of them wanted to be involved with the center's film festival as volunteers, and either that or attendees. But we'll see whether they show up or don't. But there are a number of things that are going on in the news. And speaking of students, the slaying of a Georgia student became part of the U.S. immigration debate. So Georgia lawmakers are saying the suspect in that particular murder should have not been on the streets. So he is definitely accused of seriously disfiguring the nursing student, as the affidavit reveals grim details in the case. But it does look like there is some speculation that he should not have been in the area in the first place. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the immigration conversation. And Biden warns Israel of diminishing international support over the Gaza offensive. So Hamas pours cold water on Biden's ceasefire optimism, and Taylor Swift's dad is accused of punching a photographer. So that is something else that is going on. So it looks like Taylor Swift's dad might be getting him in trouble as well. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and what folks have to say about that. Israel is ready to pause the Gaza war if a hostage deal is reached. That is what Biden has said, and all along those lines. And speaking of Biden, apparently Biden was on late night last night. So maybe he is trying to appeal to some of the younger voters and some of the folks that have not been in his corner as of late. So it does look like he was on the Seth Meyers show, and we'll see whether this impacts his kind of popularity or not popularity, and we'll see how this all goes as well. And by the way, oil prices were falling as Biden signaled a Gaza ceasefire is possible by next Monday. So definitely that is going on, and I'm curious to see when I bring him on if Rick Rosner had watched that particular late night show and all in that space. Macron has said nothing is ruled out, including using Western troops to stop Russia winning the Ukraine war. But Germany rebuffs Macron on troops in Ukraine and tells Paris to supply more weapons. So Europeans have ruled out sending troops to Ukraine as Russia rebukes Macron. So he actually got rebuked by a couple of folks and everything. So NATO countries are scrambling to deny ground troops will go into Ukraine after Moscow warns of an inevitable conflict. And Jeremy Hunt plans a national insurance cut. So I'm not sure how Nick will feel about that. And vape tax for the budget. So even though that's not here in this particular area, that's actually in the UK. But hey, it'll be interesting to see if some of those kind of policies don't make their way to this area and all in that space. And I've actually got to find out if Nick has any clients that are international. But definitely we know he does a lot of work with his pension company here in North America with insurance. And I think it's just strictly the United States, but it might be other places that are part of North America as well. But the IFS is saying that Jeremy Hunt's dubious financial planning lacks credibility, and the UK tax burden to hit a record high regardless of the budget, according to what some analysis has found. And after the U.S. strike, Iran's proxies scale back attacks on American bases. So Iran ordered its proxy groups to lay off attacks on U.S. military in Iraq and Syria. So Iran, wary of a wider war, urges its proxies to avoid provoking the United States. So it looks like that is something that is going on. And the PFLP has condemned U.S. action in Yemen. And as I was telling Nick, there's a case involving um, kind of that whole notion of three folks in love and the consequences of that. But yes, there was definitely a murder in Australia, and the bodies of an Australian couple killed by a police officer who was an ex-boyfriend have been found. So the bodies found in the search for an Australia TV presenter, Jesse Baird, and his partner Luke Davies. So definitely they have found that slain couple after following tips from the alleged murderer. And definitely the bodies were found in surfboard bags after tips from the cop's ex-lover accused of murdering them. So that is something that we are seeing as well. And Biden is to convene, speaking of Biden again, a congressional leaders as partial government shutdown looms. So it looks like Biden is to meet with congressional leaders ahead of another government shutdown. So that deadline is nearing, and we will definitely see if we will see what happens in that, because Biden is urging congressional leaders to avoid a government shutdown and to send aid to both Ukraine and Israel. So definitely that is something that is going on in the world. And of course, we know that, as I said several times on this news report, that the Middle East is in the news, and Hamas has signaled no breakthrough in their ceasefire talks. So in concession, Israel may free 15 high-profile prisoners for female soldiers. So in a swap deal, Israel is to free 400 Palestinians in return for 40 Gaza captives. So definitely looks like jail militants might become the ultimate bargaining chip in the Israel-Hamas hostage deal. And Hungary parliament has cleared the path for Sweden's NATO membership. So that is something else that we are seeing in the world. So definitely that is something that we are seeing in that space. And by the way, we know about the death of one of the activists, but in Russia, but it looks like prominent Russian human rights activist Oleg Orlov gets a 2.5 years in prison. So he has been sentenced to that amount, and Russia jails activists as Kremlin apparently is widening its crackdown on critics. So I'm sure that Amnesty International and others will be watching to see what happens with this particular gentleman as well. So definitely it looks like he's been sentenced to jail for that particular time, and all in that way. And it looks like there have been some Indians hired for Russia's war in Ukraine. So some reports from the BBC are saying that Indians have been duped by agents into fighting for Russia. So the Gujarat youth in Russian army were killed on the Ukraine front. So definitely that is something else that we are seeing, and it'll be interesting to see how India reacts to this as well. And UN's top court hears key case on Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory. So that is something else that we are seeing in the news. And the majority of the countries argue that Israel violated international law in the last historic hearing at UN court. So Arab states, Turkey, have asked the World Court to declare Israeli occupation illegal. So that is something that we are seeing in the news as well. And if you're wondering about the UK, Lee Anderson refuses to rule out joining Reform UK after some of the claims that have been out there by some of the Islamists that are in that area as well. So all looks like folks have refused to call out Lee Anderson's comments that some people have perceived as being Islamic focused. Islamophobic, and the UK Conservative has suspended the lawmaker after he accused London's mayor of being controlled by Islamists. Who definitely the whole notion of what to do with folks that are from other religions is playing out even in that part of the world as well. If you're wondering about the cartels and their impact on Europe, yeah, they have an impact on Europe as well. And a super cartel member was sentenced to life in Dutch prison. So the 6-year Dutch trial ended in a life sentence for a cocaine cartel leader. So definitely this is one of Europe's biggest drug lords, and definitely there looks like some witnesses turned against him, and the Dutch court has convicted 17 in a landmark trial of deadly gang including former most wanted fugitives. So definitely it does look like they are trying to crack down there in the Dutch area and all along those lines. So, and by the way, it does look like Russia is preparing a new summer offensive against Ukraine, according to what Zelensky is saying, and China is slamming the idea of sanctions and the threat of sanctions as well. So definitely that is some of the things that we are seeing in the news. And by the way, I learned recently that on Friday, Kamala Harris will be making a trip here into this area. And I'm thinking because it was a Winston-Salem based newspaper that or media outlet that they will be coming into the what we call the triad area, which is Greensboro, Winston, and I believe High Point is the other part of that triad and everything. So they will be coming and visiting that area in another visit to North Carolina, an important swing state, to try to make the claim for President Biden and her to stay in the White House and to have another 4 years to do some of their work as well. So they are definitely recognizing the importance of North Carolina as a swing state. And in Austin, there was a vigil honoring Next Benedict, and apparently some people are saying that it highlights the increased trans community violence. So students walked out of the Oklahoma high school where a non-binary student was beaten and later died, and this was all as part of a protest about that particular death. So definitely that was also to protest some of the bullying policies. And we have a show here on the network that talks about bullying, which is Where is the Love, that airs every Sunday at 6 o'clock. So definitely this will be interesting to see how this goes on. And in talking about this, before I bring in my panelists and everything, it looks like Trump and Biden are aiming to cement their dominance in the Michigan presidential primary, which is today. And of course, that is a week before Super Tuesday. So we'll see how things play out and all in that way. So apparently in the Michigan primary, folks are saying that Biden shouldn't fear Rashida Tlaib's threats. And the uncommitted campaign makes a final push in the Democratic presidential primary and protest and all along those lines. And Gretchen Whitmer says that she expects a sizable protest vote against Biden in Michigan. So definitely it looks like what folks are going to see about how Michigan politics plays out today. And definitely it looks like, while some people are saying, according to NPR, that the center of uncommitted activism, young Michigan voters have found political power. So it'll be interesting to see how this particular political power plays out and all in that way. And by the way, the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx is to offer free tuition for students after a $1 billion gift. So it does look like folks might be getting free tuition at that particular Bronx medical school. So that's what happened in that particular area of the world. And I'm sure that the students there are quite excited and all in that way. And last but not least, apparently Aaron Bushnell, a senior U.S. airman who set himself on fire, and I'm guessing that this was some sort of political protest. Apparently it was an anti-Israel protest, and definitely he has passed away after killing himself outside the Israeli embassy. And some people are saying that he was an anarchist from a certain religious sect and all in that way. So definitely that'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that. Just like it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about the American whose yacht was hijacked in Grenada and they were likely thrown overboard. And I do know, because having some friends in the Caribbean area, that there are definitely pirates and others in that part of the world, but they're saying that they probably were thrown overboard and died, and blood found on the kidnapped American yacht during a Caribbean prison escape, and they are presumed to be dead. So definitely that is something else that is going on, and apparently the Sons are speaking out about that as well. So an escaped prisoner suspected of killing the missing Virginia couple has now appeared in court. So this incident did take place some time back and all along those lines. So I'll bring in Rick Rosner, see what he's got going on in his work. And I think that I've got Lee Newton Rhodes with me as well. So it looks like we're on the cusp of another election and everything are on the edge of another one, and that'll be in Michigan. Apparently, there might be some protest vote where folks will not be paying attention to what's going on in. I mean, we'll be paying attention to what's going on in that part of the world, and apparently, there might be some protest votes that folks will sit on their hands and not decide to go.
So here's what you're looking for on the GOP side. During the first three caucuses and primaries, Trump underperformed the polls, and we want to see if that's a trend. He's expected to, according to the polls, pull in about 78.7% of the vote. Nikki Haley, of course, getting the rest. I expect him to underperform just by a little bit, get about 75% of the vote, which speaks to the polls being off, overestimating Trump's popularity. But we'll see in, 12 hours.
Yeah, speaking of that and everything, there's been a lot of talk, even when you think about folks that are looking at whether Nikki Haley would be a better candidate or Mr. Trump against President Biden, about the margin of error. And I've never quite understood the margin of error, but you are a person that understands and studies polls as well as just studies the news in general. So I was wondering your take on that, because I think that they say that it is pretty much a toss-up if we go by the margin of error between Biden and Trump.
So the more people if you polled everybody in America, and with the caveat that those people are responding honestly, then your poll should exactly match, the voter, how the voters are going to do. Right. You can't do that. You only can poll, between 400 and 2,000 people every time you do one of these polls, and there are formulas to calculate. If the poll says this percent, and you poll 800 people, then what's your margin of error? It's going to be, right, 3.5% either way. And it's just because you can't ask every single person in the country, and the fewer people you ask, the bigger your margin of error is going to be.
So that makes sense. But yeah, they do seem like that margin of error does give the possibility of a toss-up, even though I know that Nick, one of our co-founders, has oftentimes said that he feels that Trump is going to win in November and everything, but it does seem like Nikki Haley has a greater lead over Biden.
In 2016, polls underestimated Trump, but you remember in 2016, Comey dropped a bomb on Hillary Clinton's campaign saying she was under FBI investigation again with 8 days to go, which, if you toss new information in, it's going to change. So those polls may not have been super inaccurate, but what happened with a week to go, invalidated the polls because it changed the landscape. They call it an October surprise.
Yeah, speaking of the October surprise, and who knows, there might be one of those either from the Republican or the Democratic side. But speaking of October surprises, I'm sure that some folks, because, one of the accusations about President Biden is that he is older, and definitely, as most of us are, getting older by the minute and everything. But he apparently got interviewed, and I did not watch the interview. Maybe I'll go dig it up later on and everything, by the late night comic Seth Meyers. So I was just wondering your thoughts around this, because I remember that when I think it was Clinton went before one of those late night shows, and that's actually where he had the famous sax playing incident, and all along those lines, it gave him some
more popularity. Hall. Yeah, Clinton on Arsenio Hall back in 1992, he went on and played his sax, and Trump notoriously went on Jimmy Fallon and got his hair ruffled by Jimmy Fallon, and people thought Fallon went too easy on him. And Trump also that same year hosted Saturday Night Live, which made people crazy because you've got a candidate who had a lot of iffy stuff going on, and you're giving him all. Trump got $4 billion worth of free media coverage during the 2016 election. If he'd had to pay for all the airtime he got for saying crazy stuff, he would have had to pay $4 billion, but he got it for free, and it made the difference.
Along those same lines and everything, I was wondering, did you watch the interview with Seth Meyers? Because it seemed like it was a very straightforward, almost news-like interview from what I'm seeing and everything. I don't know that there was a lot of.
All I saw is that they got ice. I just saw they got ice cream cones together.
Oh, they got ice cream cones together, so they did have some time to get. And I think I did see a clip of that they were going.
Biden likes ice cream, and
so they went out and got some ice cream. They went out into the streets.
Yeah, and then like I saw some conservatives on X, Twitter, saying that grown men don't eat ice cream, which is, I don't know if I'm a grown man, but I like some ice cream.
I know just around the corner from me is I think it's a Baskin Robbins or something like that. And I can tell you that there are a number of students, but also faculty that are regularly in there. I would say that it is a relatively popular stop. I know that they also have coffee, which is another reason that they may be popular.
Yeah,
also,
I love Baskin. Yeah, I love Baskin Robbins, but if I'm going to have it, then I'm going to drop a cholesterol blocker into my stomach on top of it.
Well, and I want to say that the one around the corner from me is one of those joint restaurant kind of ventures, because I think it's Baskin Robbins and it might be Dunkin' Donuts. It's one of the donut chains, but they are merged together. So there's a good possibility you can get your ice cream and your donuts at the same time and everything. But I don't know if Lee Newton Rhodes watched the interview, because I see that he's in the background and everything. But I did see, and I mentioned that earlier, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, that sometimes folks can be rescued, and when they are rescued, then sometimes they get a big windfall. I know that here in North Carolina, folks are hopeful that something like that will happen to St. Aug, which is one of our historical HBCUs that is in some serious financial trouble. And there have been another of the colleges around the country that are in financial trouble as well. But apparently in the Bronx, there is a medical school. They got $1 billion loan, and that $1 billion loan is now meaning that the students will have free tuition. I'm not sure how long that'll last, because $1 billion you can burn through in a matter of a little bit of time and all along those lines. But at least for now, they're going to have free tuition. But I just wanted your thoughts around this donor that has given this amount of money to the Albert Einstein School, and the fact that they will now be able to go to medical school of all things.
Well, that's great. I mean, $1 billion invested fairly well should generate at least $50 million in income per year. I don't know how many students go there, but maybe that thing can be kept going for quite a while. I don't have anything original to say. The colleges are in this price spiral,
right?
Where the price of college increases faster than the price of a lot of other stuff, and plus, the college experience is, well, there's competition among colleges to provide concierge level, amenities. When I went to college, you were expected, you'd live in a crappy dorm room and you'd eat, just mediocre dorm food, but I don't know.
Well, speaking of that and everything, because your daughter is going to college, I believe you said, went to college. I believe it was King College there in.
Yeah, she just got her doctorate. Yeah,
she just got her doctorate and everything. But along those same lines, one of the things that I heard, and like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I did a talk yesterday on Duke University's campus about a particular segment of Black history here in Durham, the Black Wall Street, and its connection to a cultural center that I work at. But I did get a chance. It was a small group of students, but I did get a chance to talk to a few of them individually, and at least one, if not a couple of them, were taking a gap year, which means that they'll take a year or two off. I know that gap years have been incredibly popular over the last several years. I don't even think that was as much of an option when I was in school back in the early 80s. But I just wanted your take on students that are opting on gap years, because like I said, this young lady,
I could have used it. I was extremely immature. I went to my hometown school, which was cheap back then. Right. I think you could go to the University of Colorado in-state tuition, room and board included, for like $1,500 a year. It was the cheapest place to keep me while I tried to get my shit together. And yeah, I was a bad student. If I didn't like a class, I'd just quit going. I'd accumulate tons of Fs. I was not a grown-up. And then I went back to college at 30 thinking, oh, well, now I'm going to be grown up and my student behavior is going to be more. Nope, I still was immature and lazy. And eventually I found a university that would just let you take tests and give you course credit for showing competent, command of the subject matter. But yeah, I think a lot of students could use it. And in the current, I'd say, economic, situation in America, where a lot of people have these like crappy half jobs, these side hustly jobs like Uber or Lyft driver. It doesn't, the opportunity cost of taking a year off to figure some stuff out or just to see the world, it makes sense. So what you graduate college at 23 instead of 22, so you can go out and be a barista and work Lyft.
Speaking of things making sense, and I've talked to some friends of mine, and definitely I'd love to hear your thoughts around this as well. There are, because it's coming up in the news a couple of times and everything, but there are a number of colleges where there are young professors and there are also older professors as well. Some of these women that are going to the school, as well as some of the men, are relatively attractive and everything. So I was just wondering your thoughts around this notion of May-December relationships, and even some of the students that are getting with their faculty. And like I said, in some cases, the faculty and the students' age difference is not that great, but in some cases, there are whole decades between them, and all along those lines.
So, I mean, we live in the...
Hmm?
So we live in the age of, that people expect a certain degree of informed consent.
Right.
And knowledge of the, when a professor is hitting on a student or vice versa, there's a huge power and experience gap.
Right.
And in most instances, that should preclude you're not legally allowed, if you're like, 30, to date a 16-year-old, because the level of naivete and power, is just makes the world has decided that is, statutory rape.
Yeah, definitely that's what the world has decided.
About what
the counter side of that is that there are some professors and some faculty members that I would argue are practically going into the school system after almost getting out of college and everything. Because I do know some people that are probably in their mid to early 20s that have, breezed through college. So they might be, let's say, 24 or 25, and some of these young ladies might be between 18 to 20 or 21, which is still technically in that range that you are talking about and everything. But technically, even in high school, an 18-year-old, which could be a senior, dating a 16-year-old, could fall into that category as well if the parent should decide
There are Romeo and Juliet laws, which, if a 17-year-old guy is dating a 15-year-old girl or vice versa, a lot of states are like, okay, yeah, she's underage, but so is he, or 18 and 16. That's close enough that we're going to decide that it's not. But that varies by state.
Yeah, it does vary by state.
But I mean, we're since Me Too, and even before that, I mean, well, yeah, and then some of the southern states still have like allowances for, if you want to marry a 15-year-old, you can in some states, I think still, with the parents' permission.
Yeah,
and
I think that is the case.
Other people in other states will be like, well, that's creepy. But if you look through an old issue of like Playboy magazine from the 1960s, like a third of the jokes are built around sexual coercion or tricking somebody into having sex. It was a much rapier time if you watched Mad Men.
Yeah, definitely
now we expect
time and everything. Hey, there used to be, and then we'll get back to another serious issue and everything, but there used to be a because I was thinking about this yesterday while I was eating and everything at a restaurant. So actually, it might not have been yesterday. It might have been on Sunday or Saturday. But definitely, whenever the time came up, there used to be this rule of existence. It was kind of like a one of those folklore kind of things that folks would talk about. It was called the divide by 2 and add 7, and that was supposed to be what was allowed in the dating world and everything, which sounds good in technicality because it even kind of plays what we were talking about earlier. So if you go by that rule, when you're 20, then a maximum date person would be, or the minimum that you could date would be 17, because that would be 20 divided by 2 is 10, add 7, that's 17. And I was thinking to myself,
and then 40, it's 27. 50,
right,
it's 32.
Right.
I mean, it's just like a rule that to like make what you're doing seem a little less creepy.
That's what I was thinking, because I was thinking to myself, but that's where I was going, because I was thinking to myself, if you go by that rule, then somebody that is 80 could technically date somebody that is 47, and somebody that is fortunate enough to make it to 100 could date somebody that is 57. That's 2 generations. So, but technically, if you made it to 100, you get a little bit more leeway.
Rupert Murdoch is probably pushing like 94 years old, and he's still, dates and marries people who are, I don't know, Jerry Hall, the Mick Jagger's ex-girlfriend. He married her for a few years, and I don't know, she was in her 60s and he was in his late 80s, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
The deal is, if you're going to do that, and you can't tell, the heart and the penis want what they want, but try to arrange family trusts. And if you're 88 years old and you're dating somebody who's in their 50s, you probably have quite a bit of money to make that happen.
But Rick, what was the famous case of the Harris that won a lot of money after her husband mysteriously died and everything? I think it was somebody that was based in New York. I can't remember or not, but I remember that it was a famous case where the woman was accused. I don't know if she was ever convicted of killing her husband, but the husband was like almost like 80 or 90, and she was very.
There's a whole deal of gold diggers sweeping in when somebody has mild cognitive decline. But the deal is, if you're a decent person, and you're old and you want to bring in a second wife, protect the family you made the first time around. I know a few people where they didn't adequately protect their assets from unscrupulous second wives sweeping in and taking everything.
Yeah,
that's a familiar situation.
Yeah. But getting back to another important issue in the news, and I'm hoping that Leo come on camera, or at least give us his comments in chat and everything. But I mentioned earlier that in the UK, there is a plan for a new insurance cut, but there is also plans for a vape tax. And I do know that vaping is popular even here in the United States and everything. So I just wondered our thoughts about taxing things along those lines. I want to say that way back when there was the notion of, I think they were called sin taxes, that might have included both whiskey as well as cigarettes, even here in the United States and everything. But apparently the UK is looking at this possibility of national insurance cuts. And like I said, I hope that, and I know he's having a business meeting right now, that Nick will come back and think about how that could work, if it could work here in this area, but also the notion of vape taxes. And as I said, I do know that in addition to being a presidential candidate, Lee Doon Rhodes is also a person that is involved in the accounting world and everything. So definitely it'll be interested to see what folks have to say about that as well. And Lee Doon Rhodes was actually asking, coming back to the school notion, about what if both the students are over 21, student and teacher. And that's kind of what I was alluding to and everything. So there are some students and the teachers that are definitely over 21, but there is that power dynamic and that age dynamic.
Yeah, the way you do it is, if a semester is only 15
3 months, 3 to 4 months.
Right. So if you're attracted to your professor and vice versa, you can wait. If that that attraction, if it's real, that attraction can wait till you're done with the class.
Yeah. And then Rick,
but with vaping, I'm not sure if all vaping is illegal in California, but the candy flavored vapes are for sure illegal in California because California has determined that that's just way too attractive to kids. When I was a kid, remember Swisher Sweet cigars?
I remember hearing about them. I never had any.
Oh, they were cigars, little teeny ones. They were, not, like cigarette thickness, but they were like soaked in sugar. So they were super sweet. And like kids would, would love getting a hold of them because they smoked like candy. And so.
Yeah, definitely.
There's that issue with menthol cigarettes that are favored within Black communities historically. And those have been made illegal because I think they're worse for you and they're more addictive and they're like one of those gateway kind of cigarettes.
Well, that's part of what Minister Paul Scott, who's a friend and close acquaintance of mine, talks about, because he was actually very adamant against some of the liquor companies specifically targeting the African American population and the African American youth population. He had a whole national campaign, and I had the pleasure of being on a panel with him this past December and everything. But he was talking about holistic conversation as well as a number of other things. But we did touch base on his protest, because that protest was several years back, but it is still a concern that he has even to this day, the way that some of these products specifically target young folks in the urban areas and everything. So it's everything from malt liquor to a number of other ones as well.
People have, we already live in a society where there's been a ton of legislation and just social disapproval against smoking and a lot of drinking. Used to be like, if you've got on an airplane in the 60s, the flight attendants had little packs of cigarettes to give you, a pack of 4 cigarettes. You want to smoke? On a plane in the 60s, the air on the plane was blue from all the people smoking.
But that's before we learned about secondhand smoke, because I used to go to a very popular nightclub here in Durham. There was a jazz club, and I can tell you literally that when I left that club, and I used to be a regular there, I literally would come up to my that time loft apartment and practically strip down to my sweater and whatever else I'd been wearing and throw it into the washing machine, because I could literally smell the secondhand smoke as I was leaving. I felt like Linus.
The first bar I worked in had a very low ceiling and a ton of people smoking, and there was nowhere for the smoke to go. And I had this like just skin of like, the skin pudding gets when you leave it out for too long. It was almost like that with cigarette smoke at the end of the night.
No doubt about that. By the way, Lee had asked a interesting question. He was saying, why are any cigarettes legal, and where do we draw the line with Big Brother telling adults what they can eat, drink, or consume? And he was also asking that when we were talking about kind of the notion of the professor and the student and everything, because he's saying, Rick, where draw the line? No sex but drinks, shaking hands is okay, but no kissing. So he was actually asking some questions that were pertinent to our conversation. I don't know if you had any thoughts or answers to Lee's questions.
You look at food, what our relationship to food in America, where in the 70s, 80s, I don't know, maybe 10% of 15% of Americans were overweight or obese, and now it's about 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And it's not that Americans just suddenly became pigs. It's that food got cheaper and more delicious. Fast food. When you there's the KFC Double Down, where instead of bread, your bun is made out of fried chicken. And there's the Baconator. They're like some of these fast food joints compete to come up with the most calorie packed, decadent, because they know they'll get publicity for coming up with something insane. But even not insane stuff is, fast food is cheap and it tastes super great. And, when 2/3 of the country has a problem with weight, it's not the people's fault. It's because it's the food's fault for being delicious. And
but along the same lines, Rick, Lee is asking, and I was actually going to bring up a thought about something that's going on in the commercial world as well. But he was saying, should not obesity be a choice? No diet or exercise are life choices, is his actually thoughts and everything. So he's saying that I guess the choice to go out and exercise or the choice to diet are life choices. And he's asking whether obesity shouldn't be a choice as well.
Sure. And like one of our presidential candidates has been borderline obese. And, people, you can go on Twitter and say, yeah, that fat SOB, and people say, attack him for, his policies, for his behavior, but don't body shame the guy. By the way, he looks better. I mean, he's bad at putting on his bronzer, so his face looks ridiculous a lot of the time, but physically he looks better because I think his troubles, his time in court and his frustrations, I think he's probably been eating less, and it looks like he's dropped like 15 pounds.
Along those same lines, Lee has another interesting point because and I have friends in the bar and restaurant business, but he was saying bars tell patrons when they have drunk enough and won't serve them anymore. At least that's what they're supposed to do, even though not every bar does that as much as they should, in my opinion, and everything. But he's saying, should restaurants do the same? So if you're going to one of those,
but you should, like insurance, your insurance rate. It's reasonable. When you sign up for insurance, you're supposed to be compared. The cost is supposed to be based on comparing you to everybody in the country who shares your age, your gender, your health, your lifestyle habits, say. Mm-hmm. And one thing Obamacare did was that you can't be compared to people based on what pre-existing conditions you've had. But it's fair game to, maybe give people a break on their insurance rates if they practice a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying and everything. I was going to speak of healthy lifestyle. I was going to come back to something that Lisa brought up when I brought up the financial aid there in that Bronx school. And like I said, I'm not that familiar with Albert Einstein School. It did look like it might be a strongly minority school, but he was saying, but doctors, no financial needs testing. And he is an example of those who needed the least getting help and everything. So definitely, some people may be thinking that doctors do well and all along those lines. But I don't know.
The medical school is expensive, and it's another at least 4 years on top of 4 years of undergrad. So yeah, doctors are notorious for graduating medical school with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I believe that these days, being a doctor is not an automatic ticket to getting rich.
No, it's not an automatic ticket. Exactly.
Especially like there are certain fields like OBGYN where insurance is super expensive, and if you did, and people, you shouldn't have a shortage in some fields because they pay less or they cost more to practice than fields like cosmetic surgery. Anesthesia.
Speaking of cosmetic surgery, and that's something I was going to get to in terms of business news and all along those lines. But I had read yesterday, which was quite interesting, that is, speaking of fast food, if you're going to McDonald's, because they are tying it in, because sometimes things are tied into commercial entities. So I think there's a movie coming out, but McDonald's, at least for a brief time, will not be McDonald's anymore. It'll be WickDonald's and everything, because apparently they are tying this into a movie that is being released. So if you see the famous M arch turned upside down, it is not accidental. They are doing this as part of a movie kind of tie-in and all along those lines. So, and apparently this is going to be taking place in several McDonald's around the country, and I want to argue even around the world, because it's all tied into this. I believe it's an animation movie. So I just wanted your thoughts on this, and if you will be shocked if you drive down the street and see that the McDonald's, because that is an iconic symbol, is turned upside down.
Our neighborhood got too fancy. We had a McDonald's just right down the street, but the neighborhood got too fancy, and that was replaced with a fancy sandwich shop. I used to like, an Egg McMuffin in the morning every once in a while, but now I'd have to drive miles and miles. Like we used to have a Red Lobster. The neighborhood got too fancy for that. I like some of those restaurants, but our neighborhood, ran them out.
Yeah, they ran them out. Like I said, fast food can be problematic because sometimes I know that a number of them had tried to do healthy diets as well, whether that was a salad or whether that was
I'll go to Popeyes. I like Popeyes. And if you look at the nutrition information on Popeyes, their chicken, I don't think it's light, even though it's fried. It's not super greasy. And
yeah, it's not greasy at all. By the way, I did see that one of the other popular chains, and all along those lines, is actually about to close several of its stores, even though I understand that some of their cohorts will not be doing that bad. But apparently Macy's, which we know is a very popular clothing store, is about to close several of their shops around the country and around the nation. So I just wondering your take on that, because apparently Macy's
it's a terrible time for retail. Retail was already in decline because of things like Amazon. Like right. In retail, you have to stock the store. My dad had a ladies ready-to-wear store for decades and decades, and you in the 70s, the 80s, and before, what you did was he had to fly. This was in Boulder, Colorado. He had to fly to New York City 5 times a year and be shown what the current fashions were. Then he'd like, I'll take 4 of that dress and sizes, 6, 8, 10, 12, and he had to guess everything that people might want to buy from him.
Yeah, apparently what Macy's is trying to do, they said they're going to have a greater focus on luxury. So they're planning to close approximately 150 stores nationwide as part of a massive reorganization that will see the retailer pivot to a greater focus on luxury sales. So they announced that.
Yeah, people who like the full service, people who like the fanciness, people who like the no questions asked return policies. But retail's brutal. Because you're competing with Walmart, with Temu, which they'll find with fast fashion, there's a fashion trend, might start out as couture, but it can be knocked off in China, so a dress that started off on the Oscars red carpet that might have gone for $10,000 might get knocked off, and you can get it from China for $55 without going to a store at all. And then COVID came along and just was the hammered retail. So the only reason that I would want to get into retail at this point, especially in things like clothing, is, and we see this in, again, my neighborhood, which has some fancy streets, is, if you can afford to lose money, if it's a vanity project, this boutique just, is something fun for you to do, and there's somebody else in the family who's making a ton of money to let you do this retail adventure.
Speaking of retail and adventures and everything, I've got to ask you this, because I know you brought up on Naked at Night as well as some of your other shows, and definitely Jatopia and others have brought up AI. Sometimes, and I think sometimes they do it intentionally because phones have slip guards and everything else, but phones have a habit sometimes of breaking and all along those lines. So mine did that recently. So I got a newer phone, same brand and everything, but a newer phone. And I noticed that every time that I pick up the phone, there is something very popular that is on the phone. It seems like every time you turn around, there is somebody trying to get you to download an AI app of one sort or another. And I'm sure that our kids are seeing this as well. So I just wanted your take on the popularity of AI and how it is just all over the phones. I don't care whether it's a T-Mobile or Sprint or whatever your different brand is. I guarantee you that the kids are getting swamped by different games that are saying that they are AI games, literal AI that is, AI imagery and things along those lines. So it does seem like there is I won't say conspiracy, but a concerted effort to get more people involved in AI, and sometimes the gateway is the phone, just like sometimes.
So right now, this is the era of dumb, flashy AI.
Right.
The AI is not very smart yet, doesn't understand anything. It's just pretty much a big data, prediction engine. If you like this, then you might like this, and
But Rick, I can tell you that because I get the apps and they're quite hilarious. But there is so much efforts, and I think our young folks are definitely falling for it, to have a quote unquote AI girlfriend and a quote unquote AI wife.
So the deal that I believe, AI is going to get smarter, and it's going to get smarter than us within 10 years. And John Oliver, he picks one issue every week, and this week's issue is something called pig slaughtering scams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you get calls on your phone or you get emails that are really stupid, like somebody's obviously trying to scam you. Like, dear Mr. Lee, I represent so-and-so from Nigeria who has died and left you $50 million.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a scam. But these pig slaughtering scams are ones that are developed over months, where you get a message: is this Cindy from from Jessica's party? And then you write. Some people write back saying, "So sorry, wrong number." And then the person says, "Oh, sorry, blah blah blah." And where are you at? And you start talking. Somebody who might be lonely or just has good manners. Like when I get a wrong number on my phone, I'm lazy. I get terrible manners. I never tell somebody, I'm not so-and-so
you're looking for. But Rick, the one that I used to love, and I got burned by it.
But the deal, but hold on, let me get to, I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time to get to my point, is these pig slaughtering scams, you make friends with somebody over a period of months, and eventually you draw them into a financial scheme. And even sophisticated people, a bank president was scammed for $50 million. A lot of these, like the obvious scams, pick on old people who are losing it, but these scams pick on sophisticated people. And the deal is, society keeps getting more complicated, and in the future, we're going to need AI just to help us get through the day, so we don't get fooled, so we can understand what's going on. And we are going to have AI, like nannies, consciences, concierges.
The AI that I love, and maybe they can help you in that regard. And it used to be a scam, and I think it still exists, where the mysterious check will come in your mail. Sometimes they will ask you to go and do secret shopping and all in order to cash the check. But a lot of times the checks are totally bogus and everything. And sometimes the checks may even be for a sizable portion of money, but they look like very real checks and everything. They even have the watermark and a number of other things that real checks.
There's a whole deal where, like, maybe you sell something on eBay for $60, and you get a check for $6,000. I think eBay has protections against, you don't do checks on eBay. But say you sell something for $60, on Craigslist, and you get a check for $6,000, and you're like, "Whoa, this check is way too big." And they're like, "Oh, sorry, made a mistake. Go ahead and cash it. Keep $500 for your trouble and send us back the rest." And by the time you figure out the check is bogus, you've been taken for thousands of. But again, that's an old familiar scam, and everybody knows the grandma scam now, where you get a call, and AI helps you do that scam even better, where a kid claiming to be your grandchild says they've been arrested in Mexico and they need $12,000 to get out of jail. And AI can help, like, simulate a voice that sounds like your kids or some other loved ones.
No doubt, as we get ready to wind down, just to get some clarity for those that were listening and everything, McDonald's literally is going to change and flip their iconic M logo, and it is tied actually to an anime movie. So yeah, they're making a majorly unexpected change to its iconic M logo next week, flipping the logo letters upside down. Yes, the golden arches are about to become a W, making the fictional McDonald's change from anime shows and movies a reality. Not only that, but the fast food giant will be changing up its packaging with manga-inspired designs, sharing short episodic anime videos, and launching a brand new sauce, a limited edition savory chili McDonald's sauce. So definitely it'll be playing toward the anime market and toward this particular release and everything. So the changes are kicking off from February 26th. So they actually kicked off yesterday in the U.S. and they're also said to be rolling out over 30 global markets. So definitely they haven't been confirmed which markets those will be, but who knows? There's even been McDonald's in Russia, so maybe they're going to have a McDonald's.
I think McDonald's, like a lot of Western chains, pulled their operations out of Russia when the war started.
Yeah, and McDonald's might have been one of those as well and everything. So definitely they'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Those are going to be treated even to a unique immersive experience as the restaurant in Los Angeles will be transferred into a real life McDonald's on March 9th and 10th. So Rick, you can go there. They're going to have 360 projection mapping and immersive tabletop projection. So Terry,
so the nice thing of one of the nice things about living in LA is that when shows come out, they're competing for Emmys and nominations and for other awards. And sometimes restaurants, sometimes shows like Stranger Things will put up a pop-up restaurant so you can eat in your favorite TV show because they're trying to get people to like butter people up so they vote for them for the Emmys.
And apparently that's what they're doing here because they're saying this. Mr. Hassan is saying that anime is a huge part of today's culture, and we love that our fans have been inviting us into the conversation for years. That McDonald's universe is a reflection of what fans have created. It honors their vision and celebrates their creativity while authentically bringing it to life in our restaurants for the first time ever. But I can only imagine that would be like, in some cases, what some people would call a sensory overload if you're sitting there eating that delicious McDonald's sandwich, if it's delicious to you and everything, and then also having to get all that sensory and stuff that's going on.
Just wait 5 years when you can put on your VR, AR goggles and go to a virtual restaurant or a restaurant that's augmented. Like, I would bet you money that within 8 years, McDonald's does promos where for people who have some kind of goggle on where they walk into a McDonald's and it's not the regular now you're in the middle of a jungle and there's snakes like curling around your seat while you're eating. And
that can be very scary and everything. I know we've only got about another minute or two. Hopefully Lee will answer this question since he is a presidential candidate in chat, or maybe even Nick will as we're winding down, because yes, Russia, Ukraine, and China will actually be repeats because our fine friend Sasha is actually in Aruba, so he'll come back next Monday on, I believe that's the 5th. It's next Tuesday, I should say, with a live show and everything. But my question is, are we eventually going to have, and Lee can answer this in chat really quickly, an AI president as well as Nick and everything? Because there are some people that are thinking that with all the technology and AI, maybe we don't need to worry about Biden and Trump because there will be a AI leading the entire government, and some people might even think that might be better. So I know Lee is a candidate. I know he wants to be the real candidate, but will we have an AI candidate?
Eventually, we'll have to decide who qualifies as human, who has rights, because like you take Rupert Murdoch, who's got $1 billion and he's 94, and say his brain just starts failing and he starts replacing half and then 3/4 and then 90% of his brain with biocircuitry, and half his brain is in a box, that he takes with him to help him think. And like his maybe he's got greedy like grandchildren who are like, well, he's no longer, competent or even alive. This thing is no longer human. This thing's brain is gone. It's been replaced with AI, and the courts are going to have to decide who gets. And if you want to marry, your robot girlfriend, 20 years from now, then we'll have to the courts, we're going to mess it up. We're going to get a lot of things wrong. I mean, abortion's been an issue for thousands of years, and we still haven't figured out how to deal with that. And then we've got a ton of AI-related issues about to kick our asses.
Yeah, we also haven't dealt, and we can talk about that on World Politics later on this evening in Ad 5. We haven't dealt enough with the immigration issue. I know that Nick talks about that regularly, and apparently
let's go back to AI, because so conservatives like to say 4 million or 8 million, they make up numbers, or it's hard to track the numbers, have entered the U.S. without, undocumented immigrants under Biden. But my buddy who's in the AI space, and he's like a little Bill Gates. He builds tech companies and he sells them, he says that by the year 2100, the world will have 1 trillion AIs. So I think it's ridiculous to worry about immigrants overly much. They're less than 4% of the U.S. population. I think it's like Lance, who I argue with, once every week on our show on your network. He worries about Muslims, and I'm like, and it's great. Like, who cares? Like, the U.S. is less than 1% Muslim. It's land. Most Muslims are not a-holes. Of course, every big group of people has some a-holes. But the deal is, why worry about freaking little groups of immigrants or nationalities or religions, when really it's AI that's going to overwhelm us?
But as we head out the door and everything, and like I said, we talk more about this on the news, World Politics at 5 o'clock. But I do know that there's the immigration issue will come up in the news because of this Georgia case as well. Like I said, that actually involves a student. And like I said, I would definitely mention a couple of things with students and everything on this particular show. But yeah, there is a student that was murdered there in Georgia, and they are saying that the person that has been accused of committing that murder was of the Latin American culture, and that they shouldn't have been here
from Venezuela. I think he and his brother, both scumbags, had been apprehended several times, and I think kicked out, got snuck back in, then got paroled. Yeah, it's one of those deals where the system needs to be fixed, and drop the ball with these a-holes.
No doubt about that. Well, speaking of that, we're getting ready to get out the door, and we'll continue some of this conversation at 5 o'clock Eastern time, 2 o'clock your time, and everything being on the Pacific Coast. And we'll continue these discussions in a few hours on World Politics. So we're going to get on out of here.
Thanks. Bye.